Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel. Today we'll be talking on one of the very useful topic again. Every now and then in arrhythmias we were discussing regarding particularly in a cardiac arrest, tachycardia, etc. We were discussing regarding ACLS, Advanced Cardiac Life Support, mainly in a chapter of cardiac arrest. So what exactly it includes, how exactly you should do it, what are the guidelines, etc. We will be talking in little more detail. So this will be very helpful to the person who is working in a ICU or who is working in a intensive care unit, acute care unit, emergency wards, etc. So again declaring, I'm not a cardiologist. I'm still a student. I'm learning a lot of things every day in and out. So whatever I'm gaining a knowledge, I'm sharing with you. So I'll try to make it as simple as possible so that you can understand. And if you understand, you will remember. If you remember, you will try to recognize those things and you will look for that in a person and you will implement that during your treatment. So we are going to talk today regarding what we call as ACLS. So you look at more and more number of patients, you listen to more and more person, you will know more and you will know what to do. BLS means basic life support. Any person who collapses, you want him to survive. You want him to be alive. So whatever you do at that time is called basic life support. And when he comes out of that and then you put him on a different type of a treatment where you want a heart to function nicely, we call advanced cardiac life support. And further, there was one term which was utilized previously, now that this term is not utilized. It is called as a prolonged cardiac life support or prolonged life support. Now, this is sometimes being misleaded because there is also one term we call pediatric life support or pediatric cardiac life support. So that is how there is a little difference between adult and pediatric. So this term is a misleading term. Now it is not utilized much. So basic life support, advanced cardiac life support, and we call prolonged life support. So these were the terms. This term is already being replaced. This is, we don't utilize. We utilize only two, basic life support and advanced cardiac life support. So what exactly? So whenever you resuscitate any person who has collapsed, either because of cardiac arrest or because of respiratory arrest, because respiratory arrest will end up with cardiac arrest and cardiac arrest will end up with respiratory arrest. Sometimes you got both together. So in that, whatever you try to resuscitate, that we call is a resuscitation. And in resuscitation, one of the most important thing is a CPR. We call cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Now they also utilize a word we call as a cardiopulmonary cerebral resuscitation. By and large, what you do is you try to resuscitate cardiac part and pulmonary part. And if these two parts are resuscitated, automatically cerebral is also resuscitated. So that particular terminology is not utilized. So they call CPCR or CPBR, cardiopulmonary brain resuscitation or cardiopulmonary cerebral resuscitation. What is CPR? CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation, where you do a chest compression and you do a respiration. Now this when you do to resuscitate any person, that is a part of BLS. It is also a part of ACLS or advanced life support. This is a basic. What are the component in a basic life support? Yes, if you can do a monitor, that is a EKG. What is being done in this is you try to preserve circulation, you maintain the patent airway and you maintain the breathing. These are the part and this is a part of what we call as a CPR. So whenever you do a CPR, you are doing CAB. Previously it was called ABCD. Now it is only called CAP. And then if you have got drugs which can help in resuscitation, you can utilize that. But by and large, CAPS can be done, and a CAPS should be done. It is a part of CPR. And when you add all these things with further extension, we call advanced life support. But when you are trying to resuscitate the cardiac part, that we call as the advanced cardiac life support. And when you further put him on a prolonged period, then we call it a prolonged life support, or it was also called as a prolonged cardiac life support. Now even pediatric group are putting a prefix P as a pediatric life support. So these two terms becomes a misleading term. This term is nowadays not utilized. So CPR was also called as CPBR or CPCR. Why we want a basic life support? Because there are some goals. We want to save heart, too good to die, and we want to preserve the cerebral circulation. So to take a rapid decision before a irreversible brain damage takes place, because this will happen if the person gets a cardiac arrest for more than 4 minutes. Now say that already person will have a irreversible brain damage after 10 minutes of cardiac arrest. So you have to have, and so this is called chain of survival. As soon as you suspect any person who has collapsed and he needs a basic life support, what you need is you call for a help. You immediately give a ring, you call for a help. You start CPR. At the same time, if you have got an AED, we call as a automated electrical defibrillator, we call as a, you can subject that person to a defibrillation, because the one of the most common cause of a collapse is a cardiac arrhythmia, which we call as ventricular fibrillation and asystole. Ventricular fibrillation, ventricular tachycardia, which are shockable, while ventricular asystole and we call as a PEA, that is, yes, so in those two conditions you don't shock them, and you can give advanced cardiac life support. So whenever you come across any particular person, this is the chain of survival we call. So try to do that as early as possible and see that the circulation is preserved, breathing is preserved, and you salvage the brain from a irreversible brain damage. So this is, say, as for example, a person who is on a beach where you don't have a hospital available. As soon as you see a person in a cardiac arrest, this is what you should do. 2 or 3 person gets together. He is giving breathing through an ambush bag. This is ambush bag. They are preparing for a AED, automated defibrillator. Yes, automated defibrillator, and he is giving CPR. So more and more number of persons who are there, they can help you out, because this person will get fatigue very fast. So try to have a help from a different people. So you diagnose the person is in a cardiac arrest, we call 3-0. No pulse, no blood pressure, no respiration. At least you can look for a pulse and respiration. Very easy. So if a person has got 3-0, you will say that this person is in a cardiac arrest. So in a BLS, we call adult BLS. If a person is unresponsive, there is no breathing, and person is gasping, and there is no pulse, immediately what you should do is call for a help. Make an arrangement for a defibrillator, automated defibrillator. We call automated external defibrillator. Yes, that is that particular AED. And what you have to give is high quality CPR. What is high quality CPR? You give at least 100 compression in 1 minute. And a compression should be such that the chest should move minimum 5 centimeter, or we call 2 inches, and allow a complete chest to recoil after each compression. With minimum interruption, chest compression should continue, and avoid excessive ventilation. So, and we say that for 30 compression, you should have a 2 respiration. So approximately in 1 minute, you will have 8 to 10 breathings. So give one breath every 5 to 6 seconds. Recheck the pulse every 2 minutes. And when you check for the pulse, if pulse comes back, then you can stop CPR. But if pulse does not come back, you continue your CPR. So we call 30 compression and 2 breath cycle. So almost we say that 8 to 10 respiration and 100 compression in a minute. Approximately that should be the target. So this is called basic life support. And then further advance, you give drugs, etc. in a place where all the facilities are available. We call person should have defibrillation if it is shockable, which is a shockable condition. VT we call as a pulseless VT, or we call a person who has got a ventricular fibrillation, where also pulse is absent. And 2 conditions where they are not shockable, where you will have to continue with CPR only, and then try to go for a advanced cardiac life support. That is PEA, pulseless electrical activity, and second is cardiac asystole, or we call ventricular asystole, or a standstill, or we call ventricular arrest or cardiac arrest. So these are the conditions where you cannot shock them. So there defibrillation will not be of any help. So this is advanced cardiac. Person is shifted to a hospital where you got a monitor, he is looking at the monitor, he is looking what is the type of a rhythm. She is giving breathing by ambush back. She is preparing for AED, we call as a automated external defibrillation. So 2 pads are put here, 2 pads are there, and you can give an electric shock. He is giving CPR and looking at whether the pulse is appearing or not, and this lady will be helping further. So this is called advanced cardiac life support. So in that particular, you try to recognize cardiac arrest as early as possible. You start CPR, and if it is a shockable arrhythmia which is seen on a monitor, you can go for a rapid defibrillation directly 360 joules. So you go for that particular defibrillation, and you can, in between CPR, you can go for other additional supports like IV fluids, drugs, etc. And once the person recovers, we call spontaneous recovery, then you can go for post cardiac care. So this is what is called as a link which is there in any person who needs a cardiac life support. That will include CPR, defibrillation, advanced life support, and post cardiac care. This is a must in any person who is critically ill. Early recognition of a critically ill patient and who is having cardiac arrest. So you must try to go for that. So look at where the person was found, why he went into that. Try to look for that. If the victim is unresponsive, there is no respiration, there is no pulse, shout for a help, get AED, that is we call automated external defibrillator, start CPR, and meanwhile you start monitoring the patient. Which way you give a CPR is mentioned here, we have already mentioned before. And if the person has got no pulse, no breathing, continue with CPR. 30 compression, corresponding you give 2 breaths, almost we say that 8 to 10 breaths in 1 minute, and 100 compression in 1 minute. and how much is the compression, etc. We have already mentioned before. So this is a standard what we call chain of survival: early SS, early CPR, early defibrillation, early advanced care, and early post resuscitation care. So when you do all this, the chain of survival will help the person to revive back. So prompt activation of emergency service, early CPR, early defibrillation, advanced life, advanced life care, and we call post resuscitation care. So, but we should always think of to prevent a cardiac arrest. So any person who has collapsed, you try to do what we call as a CAB, CAB. So circulation should be preserved, airway should be preserved, breathing should be preserved, and simultaneously you give the treatment for cardiac arrhythmias like tachyarrhythmias, bradyarrhythmias, which can produce cardiac arrest. And for treating, once the person is got in cardiac arrest, CPR, defibrillation, drugs, monitoring, etc. And we send him to advanced cardiac life support care. And once the person recovers, we call recovery of spontaneous circulation. So once the person has got ROSC, so that particular person now should be subjected to the post-arrest therapeutic, which will include many things, including even hypothermia. So this is BLS, which includes CAP, that is we call as a CPR, compression, airway should be followed by breathing. So this is CPR, chest compression, airway and breathing. And we already mentioned what should be the type of a chest compression, etc. This is high quality CPR, 100, minimum 100 chest compression in a minute. And you should have a depth of compression 5 centimeter minimum, we call 2 inches. Complete recoil should be allowed. There should be 2 breaths after 30 compression. Each breath delivers over 1 second, and minimum interruption should be there. And if at all there is an interruption, it should not be more than 10 seconds. See that the person do not get more interruption while doing any other procedure like defibrillation, etc. All should be ready fast. At the same time, your chest compression should not be too fast and too hard, so that you produce more complications. Too fast will produce certain complication, too hard will also produce certain complication. So see that you give a best CPR. Now there are what we call as a mechanical CPR which are available, which you can put like this and they will give you a constant nice compression which will be 5 centimeter depth and rate will be around 100 per minute. So the person who is giving a CPR will not get fatigue. So you don't have to go on changing the guy who is giving a CPR. So this is one of the best way which is available, and if this facility is available, you can give the best chest compression. But for a respiration, you will have to get the help of one person. What are the contraindications? Absolutely no contraindication. If there is an heart sounds, if there is a pulse, if there is a respiration, meaning the person has got circulation and respiration both, he doesn't need CPR. If any person who gets a flail chest, if he has got a multiple fracture rates, if there is a severe chest deformity, do not resuscitate, because while resuscitating you will produce lot of complications. So in that particular, do not resuscitate. And if a person is fully conscious, he does not require resuscitation. It is said that we already told you 100 breaths per minute or 100 compression per minute, and should be 2 centimeter or 2 inches or 5 centimeter should move down. So depth should be 2 inches or 5 centimeter. At least for giving a base CPR, you need a 3 person. One person is giving a chest compression and 2 person will be required, because one person will have to hold the mouthpiece and one person will have to compress that what we call as a balloon which is there in a case of an ambush bag. So you will require minimum 3 person, and if more person are there, it is always helpful. because one person will be required for defibrillation and one person you will require to interchange with this CPR person. So you require that. When Embus bag is not available, you can give mouth-to-mouth breathing. So BVM is bag, valve, mask. So this is bag, there is a valve here, and this is a mask, and this is available in Embus bag. If there is a one person, what he will have to do, he will be giving a chest compression, and after 30 compressions, he will have to give one mouth-to-mouth breathing. This is when the single rescuer is available. But if there are two people who are available, before giving a mouth-to-mouth breathing, you will have to tilt the chain. Jaw thrust should be done, and then mouth-to-mouth breathing should be done. You can put a orolaryngeal pathway or oropharyngeal pathway. This is oropharyngeal, and this is nasopharyngeal path airway. So that when you give an oxygen, it can directly go to the oropharynx, and that can be delivered to the trachea and to the lungs. There are combi tubes which are available. So you can put a combi tube. These red tubes will go into trachea, and this green tube will go into esophagus. So this will help in preventing what we call as the aspirations. So you have got an oral airway, you have got a nasopharyngeal airway, you have got an endotracheal tube. Endotracheal tube will go from a oral cavity into directly into trachea. So this will be, and you will have to inflate this bulb so that person do not aspirate. So these are different things. There is another way where you can give, that is called LMA, laryngeal mask airway. So this particular portion has got small opening through which the oxygen can go. This will just lie here at the level of epiglottis. So it will block esophagus. So there will be no regurgitation. Whenever you give an oxygen through this tube, it will pass via this, through this particular what we call as a mask, and there is an opening, so it will be delivered directly into the trachea. So oxygen will go, but nothing will regurgitate back from esophagus into oropharyngeal area so that the person aspirates. And this is Embus bag. This is a mask, here is a valve, and this is a bag. So that's why it is called EVM. Here I have shown you that. BVM, sorry. BVM. Bag, valve, and mask. But don't use, you can use the word Embus bag. This is mouth-to-mouth breathing. You can see here also. Mouth-to-mouth breathing. This is mouth-to-mask. You want to prevent certain contact infections. So you can give mouth-to-mask. So you put a mask and you give a breath. Best way is this, what we call as the Embu bags. These Embu bags are available, and you can attach the end of Embu bag to a oxygen. So you are delivering the oxygen, and you got a less amount of it, you will have a nice expansion of the chest. So these are the basic life supports what we do. This is mouth to mask. This is Embu's bag. So have you confirmed that you have placed the tubes properly? You can confirm by auscultation. Suppose if the endotracheal tube is not in a trachea, but it is say in the esophagus, air will go into esophagus, and you will find the air is producing bubble, and when you auscultate over the epigastrium. And if it is in the lungs, but suppose if you are auscultating only breath sounds, or what we call as the sounds which are only heard on one side, your endotracheal tube is on the one side of the trachea, because trachea bifurcates into right and left bronchus. So if it is in one side, the other lung will collapse. So try to look at this. And another way to confirm is you can have a continuous waveform capnography. So if you put an end of this tube and connect it to the capnography, if during a chest compression you get minimum 10 of PCO2, means your chest compression is good. In a normal person, capnography should go to up to PCO2 35. Another way to detect is calorimetric endotracheal carbon dioxide detector. So that will help to detect whether your chest compression is working or not. And there is a third way. So capnography, calorimetric, carbon dioxide detector, or esophageal detector device. So when you squeeze this, if it is in the esophagus, it will remain squeezed, but if it is in the trachea, it will re-expand back. So this is another way you can find out. So these are the different way, but very easy way is by doing an auscultation. We already mentioned what is the CPR quality. When you get return of a spontaneous circulation, what you should do. After that, you should try to find out the reversible causes and try to treat those reversible causes, which we have already done before in a pulseless electrical activity. So you try to do. You have to give oxygen, CPR, do a monitoring, and if required, whatever treatment is available, you can give that. So CPR, shock, non-shockable condition, continue with CPR. So this is automated external defibrillator. You can put the two pads and you can give an defibrillation shock. And you can adjust depending upon what type of monitor is giving you. If there is a monitor, you can record the strip also. You can record that particular things. In a case of an opioid poisoning, you can go through at least the time. You will have to give naloxone. So in a person who has got opioid poisoning, you can use a naloxone injection if it is available, or you should make an availability of that particular material and give them. If a person has got choking because of a foreign body, this is one maneuver which can be done. You compress at the abdomen, so it will produce an increase at intra-abdominal pressure, and person will blow out. Diaphragm will move up, and when the diaphragm moves up, take care in a pregnant lady. Yes, you have to take care, and this will be called as a Heimlich maneuver. And in a children, this is a simple maneuver which can be done. You have to tap at the back of the person so that the child will throw out or blow out foreign body. So basic life support should be stopped when the victim is revived. We call as a spontaneous circulation comes back, restoration of the spontaneous circulation. If a trained person is there, allow the trained person to give a CPR. If a person who is giving a CPR gets exhausted, do not continue, because he will not be able to give the best quality of chest compression. If there is an unsafe scene, don't give that. Physician directed advice should be followed, and cardiac arrest should not be given for longer than 30 minutes. There is lot of controversy. In our time, we used to give the cardiac or CPR only for 4 minutes. After 4 minutes, we used to say that person has got irreversible brain damage. Now we continue for even 10 minutes or even more, up to even 30 minutes. So the time has changed. Depending upon the guidelines, you can continue with the CPR. Why CPR fails? Because there is a delay in starting. There is an improper procedure because you have not given a proper CPR. While giving a breath, you have not pinched the nose, because whatever oxygen you give is thrown out through nose, and there is no advanced cardiac life support for a follow-up treatment, and there is no defibrillator available, or there is a delay in defibrillation. All these factors play a major role. Only 15% of CPR who receive CPR lives to go home. There is an improper technique what is utilized in a CPR. All this gives rise to failure while CPR is given. And good number of times there is a terminal illness which does not help in giving a good results while you are giving a CPR. There are some unmanageable conditions like massive myocardial infarction which you cannot do unless you have got an advanced cardiac life support. So all these things. So this is what is there. Person is found collapsed. You find out whether what is the reason for their collapse. Person is breathing or not. If person is not breathing, start circulation. If person has got no circulation, then you start what we call the defibrillation, and after the shock, check for the circulation. And CPR with defibrillation will help you a lot while giving a basic life support. There are some common complications which can occur: fracture of ribs, sternal fractures, pneumothorax, cardiac tamponade, pulmonary contusion or lung contusions, aspiration. Very rarely you can get aortic lacerations, damage to liver, damage to spleen, etc. Now we'll be talking in detail regarding what is advanced cardiac life support, and we'll be dividing into 4 groups. Advanced cardiac life support for person who has gone in cardiac arrest, for person who is having a bradycardia, for person who is having a tachycardia, and person who has developed an acute MI. This will not be tackling in detail. This we are going to discuss little bit in more detail. We have already discussed in a chapter of bradycardia, in a cardiac arrest, and in tachycardia, but we are going in little more detail. So in a, we call as a ACLS, American Heart Association. This is revised in 2015. We have already shown you, as soon as a person comes, you start CPR, you put them on a monitor, you try to identify what is a type of a rhythm. If it is VT, we call as a pulseless VT or VF. In between the CPR, give them a shock. And after giving a shock, again reassess the rhythm. If person has not recovered, then CPR should be continued. Now you start an IV line or intraosseous line. If person during that CPR is still showing a rhythm which is VTVF, again you can have an interruption for 10 seconds. You give a shock. If a person does not recover, rhythm is not recovered, then you have to continue with CPR, and now you will start with epinephrine, or we call as adrenaline or noradrenaline. So that you will have to start, and that you will have to continue. CPR is continued. Again you look at the rhythm strip. If rhythm is showing you still ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation, we'll have to give again a shock. Look at the rhythm. If it is not recovered, now you start with amiodarone, we call antiarrhythmic drugs. During this particular, the CPR should be continued, and interruption should be there only for the time, not more than 10 seconds while you are giving a DC shock. So this is a standard thing which is to be done. Now suppose when you are giving a CPR and person has got recovery or return of spontaneous circulation, then you stop CPR and you subject him to a post cardiac arrest care. So while giving a CPR, you must look at the rhythm strip and whether the person is recovered or not. If a person is recovered and rhythm strip shows a normal sinus rhythm, now you can subject him to what we call as a post cardiac arrest care. If rhythm strip is showing pulseless electrical activity or asystole, there is no advantage of giving defibrillation. So except defibrillation, all other things remain same. Continue with CPR, look at the rhythm strip, whether it is shockable, unshockable. If it is still showing you asystole, continue with CPR, no defibrillation in between. You will have to give IV epinephrine followed by what we call as a amiodarone. So continue with epinephrine if person does not recover, and if now he starts showing you a VTVF, now you can switch over to this side. So that is how you go. So if the rhythm strip is shockable while you are giving a CPR and epinephrine, now you can switch over to this side. So that is what is being done in an adult cardiac life support. And this is what you do in a case of a cardiac arrest. So this is in that detail. So initially you start with epinephrine followed by amiodarone in a case of a refractory VF. So that is what is being done. Is that clear? Right. So that is same thing. Now this is shown in a little enlarged picture. While giving a CPR, give oxygen, attach to monitor, make defibrillator available. If the monitor is showing you VTVF, give a shock. If it is asystole or pulseless electrical activity, no shock. Everything else remains same. So these are the conditions which are shockable. These are the conditions. So monomorphic VT, polymorphic VT, force VF, fine VF. So these are all shockable conditions. Basically we call VT, pulseless VT, and VF. So same thing what we have discussed. And while you are giving a shock, if you are using a biphasic shock, so you start with 120 joules to 200 joules. And if you are using monophasic, directly give a 360 joules. Biphasic is much better than monophasic. And whenever you are giving an epinephrine, give 1 milligram every 3 to 5 minutes. And if you are using vasopressin, then give 40 units, first or second dose of which can replace first or second dose of epinephrine. And when you are using amiodarone, first dose is 300 milligram bolus, followed by 150 milligram. So this is what is being done. So when you give a shock in a VT-VF, or we call pulseless VT and VF, and you look at the monitor, and if there is no recovery, we call shock resistance. In that you start an IV line and you start with epinephrine. We call shock resistance. And after giving epinephrine, if a person does not recover, then we call vasopressor resistance. And then we call anti-arrhythmic drug. Then we start with what we call as amiodarone. While here, in a pulseless electrical activity and asystole, no shock, no atropine, and no amiodarone. So this three is not given and it is contraindicated. So don't give shock, don't give atropine, don't give amiodarone. Don't start. Amiodarone should be given if you find VT-VF. Then only amiodarone will be useful. So whatever we have discussed now is given all those things in a little more detail. So you call for a help, start CPR, start oxygen by a mask or by a ambuse bag, put them on a monitor. If look at the ventricular rhythm, look at the rhythm. If it is VT, shock him. VT-VF, shock him. Again give a CPR for 2 minutes. Get an IV or IO, that is intraosseous. If a guy who is giving a CPR has got fatigue, change the guy. Again look at the rhythm. If it is there, don't take more than 10 seconds for giving a shock. This is called shock resistance arrest. Continue with CPR. Start epinephrine, 1 milligram, or you can start with vasopressin 40 units and look at the airway properly. You can put an airway, you can put an endotracheal tube, etc. in between. Again, change the CPR guy, look at the ventricular rhythm. If it is not recovered, still showing you VT, give a shock. This is called now vasopressor resistance. And now you can continue with CPR and add amiodarone. Bolus dose of 300 milligram followed by 150 milligram. After that, continue with CPR, but if CPR guy has become fatigued, change the CPR guy, look at the ventricular rhythm. If it is still VT, give him a shock. Now this is called even resistant to anti-arrhythmic drugs. And during this particular time, try to identify, continue with CPR and try to identify reversible causes like 5H, 5T. We have already shown you before 5H, 5T, hypoglycemia, hypothermia, hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, hypotension, hypovolemia, all those, hypo. And T for tension pneumothorax, thromboembolism, pulmonary thromboembolism, coronary thromboembolism, etc. So those are all 5T and 5H. Try to identify those conditions and treat them. So during this particular, these are non-shockable. So atropine, amiodarone and shock defibrillation does not help. On the top it will do more harm. So don't give atropine, don't give amiodarone and don't do defibrillation. No shock, no atropine, no amiodarone. So if a person has got reversible causes like hypovolemia, IV fluids, hypoxia, oxygen, acidosis, we call hydrogen ions. If acidosis, soda bicarb. Hypokalemia, give potassium. If hyperkalemia, soda bicarb, or you can give insulin glucose drip. And in case of hypothermia, warming. If a person has got hypoglycemia, give glucose. Tension pneumothorax needle, cardiac tamponade needling, and in case of tension pneumothorax, even a chest drainage tube. If a person has got toxins, particularly tricyclic antidepressant poisoning, soda bicarb, in case of a thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, or myocardial infarction, TPA, and in case of myocardial infarction, send him to a cath lab, have a coronary angiography followed by PCI. So these are all the things, these are all reversible conditions. As fast as possible, detect them and treat them. So this is once the person is recovered, once the person has got return of spontaneous circulation, ROSC. Now what you have to do? Maintain oxygen saturation more than 95. Consider advanced airway and waveform capnography. So you find out whether the respiration is good or not. Do not hyperventilate. Treat hypotension by vasopressor and consider treatable causes 5H and 5T. 5H and 5T simultaneously. Is it clear? So continue with saline, continue with epinephrine, or you can give dopamine, or you can go with norepinephrine, whichever is suitable for that particular person. Get a 12 lead ECG. Try to identify if he has got an MI. If he has got an MI, send him to a cath lab and try to reperfuse, coronary reperfusion. If that is not there, continue further treatment. And simultaneously, if a person has got hypothermia, target the temperature management and continue with the advanced critical care. We call it as a prolonged critical care. Now it is called advanced critical care. So this return of spontaneous circulation was also called as a ROPAS, return of pre-arrest status. But this word is now replaced totally by ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation. And you can have a complication during what we call as a defibrillation, coagulopathy, immune dysfunctions, and person can have a hyperglycemia. And whenever a person get ROSC, there is something called as what we call as when you induce hypothermia, that is called induction, maintenance, and then you bring back to the normal temperature, we call rewarming. Good number of time post resuscitation care is including we try to person who is still unconscious and person has got restoration of spontaneous circulation. You induce what we call as a hypothermia, and while induction of a hypothermia, you can give a fontanelle drips to sedate the patient and to decrease the shivering, and you continue with vasopressor drugs. You can give them vasopressor drugs. You can give an IV fluids to decrease the temperature, cold IV fluids, or you can try to identify the body temperature by putting a esophageal probes and try to identify the core temperature, or you can have a pulmonary cath and you can assess the pulmonary arterial temperature. And when you induce the hypothermia, induction is done by these methods, that is by giving an IV fluids, or you can use a cold blankets. And once the temperature has come down to 34 degree centigrade, below 34 degree centigrade, now you maintain that for 12 to 24 hours. And once that is being maintained, you will reduce these complications. And once that is being maintained, now you can do rewarming. And in that rewarming, you try to bring back the temperature back to 37 degree. So you optimize the blood pressure more than 90, mean arterial pressure should be more than 65. Breathing, carbon dioxide, endotracheal carbon dioxide should be between 35 to 40, and arterial carbon dioxide should be between 40 to 45. Try to maintain. No hyperventilation. Treat acute coronary syndrome if a person has got acute MI. Send him to a cath lab and you can induce therapeutic hypothermia. Induction, maintenance, rewarming. So you maintain the temperature between 32 to 34 for 12 to 24 hours. So this is post resuscitation care. Maintenance, rewarming. So this is maintenance, induction, and then you maintain it So you use a esophageal probe, you give a fentanyl drip, shivering, you can give even a rectal Tylenol, antipyretics, and try to bring down the temperature. And when you give for 10 minutes this solution, chilled solution, IV fluid, you will bring down in 30 to 50 minutes 1 degree centigrade. So try to bring it down close to 34 and maintain it. You can use ice packs also. You can use blankets, cold blankets. Maintenance should be done by cold blankets, cooling blankets. And whenever you want to rewarming, you can do by warming blankets. You stop all those things. This is done in a post-resuscitation to decrease the brain damage, to have a good cardiovascular function. We don't want a cardiovascular dysfunction. To detect and treat some certain precipitating factors and to prevent the complications. And we don't want a global ischemia and reperfusion damage. And once the person is recovered, stop smoking, stop alcohol, have a weight loss, maintain optimum weight, BMR should be less than 23, dietary advice, salt restriction, regular exercise under supervision, and relaxation therapy, yoga. Very well explained. Now we are going to another part we call as a tachycardia. So these are all the symptom signs of tachycardia. And in ECG you see heart rate more than what is expected at that particular age. It can be narrow complex, it can be wide complex. These are narrow complex tachycardia, these are wide complex. We are already discussed, so I am going little faster. So these are all tachycardias. These are narrow complex tachycardia, these are broad complex tachycardia. We call monomorphic, polymorphic, and we call as a supraventricular tachycardia with aberrancy. Maybe in a bundle branch block, maybe in a re-entry tachycardias like WPW syndromes, or we call as a abnormal conductions. And this is what is a chart which is you should follow. This is an algorithm which you should follow in an adult tachycardias. I have already shown this before. You can go through again. We have done in a chapter of tachycardias. So try to go through that particular chapter. So this I have already explained before. Is it clear? So whenever a person gets a tachycardia, go for vagal stimulation. You can use adenosine in a narrow complex tachycardia, and you can put them on a beta blocker, calcium channel blocker, etc. While in a wide complex tachycardia, you can start initially with vagal stimulation. It will not be benefiting ventricular tachycardias. Adenosine also will not benefit the ventricular tachycardia. You put them on what we call as the amiodarone, procainamide. These two are the first drug of procainamide is the first drug of choice. Second drug of choice is amiodarone. So use those drugs. So this is pediatric tachycardia with pulse. You can go through at your leisure time. Have a pause and look at that. This is already I have shown you before. Narrow complex tachycardia, wide complex tachycardia. How you diagnose and what you do. This I have already discussed in tachycardia chapter. This is supraventricular tachycardia. This I have discussed in supraventricular tachycardia. So go through that again. This will be repeated again and again in a different chapters. What type of electric defibrillation you can do, what you do in a person who is stable, what you do in an unstable person. I have discussed before. Vagal stimulation, adenosine, and then you can go for a CCB, etc. And this is shown in a short way that any person who develops a tachycardia, you put them on a monitor, IV line, oxygen, airway. If a person is unstable, try to identify it is shockable or not. If it is a narrow complex and person is unstable. What do you mean by unstable? Fall of blood pressure, symptom signs of congestive heart failure, and person is having altered mental status, and person is having what we call as of symptom signs finding of a left ventricular failure. So if person is unstable, so go for a shock if it is shockable. Particularly in a narrow complex, always do a synchronized cardioversion. So that synchronized shock will be given on R wave. So that is called synchronized. And these are the narrow complex regular tachycardia, SVT and atrial flutter with fixed block. You give 50 to 100 joules. If there is a narrow complex and irregular, give 120 to 200 joules in a biphasic, or give 200 joules directly if you are using a monophasic defibrillator, or we call as a cardioversion. If it is a wide and regular, give 100 joules. If it is wide and irregular, give 360 joules, and this will be in a monophasic. So this is the criteria what we are utilizing. And synchronous has to be given if there is a QRS complex. If there are no clear-cut QRS complex like polymorphic VT, torsada pointis, ventricular fibrillation, don't give synchronous. In that we give a defibrillation, and in that defibrillation you can follow this particular rule depending upon what is the diagnosis. And as far as if the person is stable, person is not having any one of these finding, so get an EKG, 12 lead EKG. If it is a narrow complex, vagal maneuver, adenosine, beta blocker, calcium channel blocker. What is the dose of adenosine and beta blocker is mentioned here. And if it is a wide QRS complex, procainamide, what is the dose? What precaution you should take? Amiodarone, what is the dose? Sotalol, what is the dose? The first drug of choice is procainamide, second drug of choice is amiodarone. So you can give 150 milligram IV bolus and you can repeat again. If you are using sotalol, 100 milligram, or you can call 15 milligram per kilogram body weight. And if there is any abnormality over 5 minutes, stop sotalol. Don't continue that. So if there is a prolonged QT, don't continue with sotalol. So these are some of the things. In a procainamide, if a person gets stop of arrhythmia stops, if there is a fall of blood pressure, if QRS complex increases, becomes wider, and if you are giving certain milligrams, this is milligram per kilogram, so don't give more than 50 milligram per kilogram body weight. So stop that. So this is the thing what you do in a tachycardia. This is what has been shown in a different varieties of sinus tachycardia, re-entry tachycardia, autonomous tachycardia like ectopic atrial tachycardia, multifocal tachycardia, junctional tachycardia. What are those and which drugs will be very helpful in all these conditions? Vagal maneuver, AV nodal blockers like adenosine, beta blockers and calcium channel blocker will be helpful. But these drugs will not be helpful in a person who does not have AV node entry. So in that condition, you will require other procedures. In a wide complex tachycardia like VTVF, SVT with aberrancy, pre-excited tachycardia, ventricular paced tachycardia or torsada pointis, the treatment will be procainamide, amiodarone or sotalol. Or you will have to go for defibrillation if person is unstable. And if it is irregular, then you have to control the rate by AV node blockers. You will have to control the rhythm by first you will have to do what we call as a heparinization or anticoagulation, and then you might have to do what we call as a electrical cardioversion, and particularly the atrial fibrillation with re-entry tachycardias, multifocal atrial tachycardia, and if the person has got sinus tachycardia with re-entry phenomena, and particularly in a WPW syndrome, long Gannock-Levine syndrome, there is a James bundle, while in a WPW syndrome there is a bundle of Kent. In this, use procainamide, which are not AV blockers. Try to use those particular things. And in a polymorphic and torsada pointis, if QT is prolonged, use magnesium, and if there is an ischemia, use amiodarone or beta blocker. These are the way you follow the algorithms. This I have already shown you in a VT chapters. If person is stable and monophasic, or monomorphic, what you do, and if it is a polymorphic, what you do. This also I have shown you a slide. If a person is stable, cardioversion followed by adenosine, amiodarone, lidocaine, procainamide or sotalol. Usually adenosine is not of use. What is the most common utilized is procainamide. And we have already showed you if it is stable, look at the P wave, whether regular, irregular. If it is regular, it is VT, SVT with aberrancy, or it is rule out hyperkalemia and tricyclic antidepressant poisoning because the treatment is different. So electrical cardioversion and first drug of choice is procainamide. Second drug of choice is amiodarone. Procainamide is more effective and safer than amiodarone. So now we go to bradycardia. We have already done in a bradycardia chapter, but again repeating, these are some of the symptoms and signs. This is what you should look in a ECG. We already done before. So sinus bradycardia, first degree AV block, second degree AV block, Mobis type 1, Mobis type 2. Mobis type 1 is also called Van Quebec phenomena. Mobis type 2 is called as a fixed block or complete heart block. These are all the conditions which can produce bradycardia. So you will have to identify on an ECG strip and then decide the treatment accordingly. So this is the algorithm. If a person has got bradycardia with a pulse, then this is the algorithm. Try to identify the conditions. If the person has got bradycardia with fall of blood pressure and if the pulse rate is less than 50, you first try to maintain the airway, maintain breathing, give oxygen, put them on a monitor, constantly monitor the blood pressure and oximetry, have an IV lines, get a 12 lead ECG, find out what is the etiology of that bradycardia. If the person has got a persistent bradycardia, look at the findings like hypotension, altered mental status, symptom signs of shock, cold clammy extremities. Is that person is having ischemic heart disease? Look at the acute heart failure signs in the form of crackles, cyanosis, etc. If findings is no, monitor the person and observe. If all these are present, then first thing is you give atropine, 0.5 milligram IV stat, up to 6 ampoules you can repeat, not more than 3 milligram. If person does not improve, start with dopamine drip or with epinephrine. Dopamine you can give only after IV fluids. Dopamine should not be given in absence of hypovolemia. So if a person is having hypovolemia, don't start dopamine drip. So in that case, you can start with an epinephrine dip. And if the person is still not recovering, expert consultation and prepare for transvenous pacing, which can be temporary followed by permanent. This is pediatric. I'm skipping this. I'm putting this slide. You can go through at your leisure time. So in an adult bradycardia, we already mentioned that put them, airway should be patent, give oxygen, cardiac monitoring, monitor blood pressure, IV lines, 12 lead ECGs, all those we have already mentioned before. If there is hypotension, altered mental status, signs of shock, ischemic chest pain, acute heart failure signs, give atropine. If that is not working, prepare for transcutaneous pacing, temporary pacing, and meanwhile give epinephrine. Epinephrine is better than dopamine, and dopamine should be given only after fluid volume is resuscitated. And if these findings are not present, patient is stable, then monitor and observe. And if atropine doesn't produce response, epinephrine is also not producing response, prepare for transcutaneous pacing, which will be usually temporary pacing followed by permanent pacing if it is not reversible. So same thing mentioned in detail again, same, I am not repeating. While you are preparing for transcutaneous pacing, always look for reversible causes. I already mentioned all this: hypovolemia, hypoxia, acidosis, hyperkalemia, hypokalemia, hypoglycemia, hypothermia, and in T, toxins, cardiac tamponade, tension pneumothorax, coronary and pulmonary thrombosis, and even traumatic injury. all these conditions. This is what we have explained before, is shown in a single chart. What you do, find out the underlying conditions, oxygen, IV fluid, ECG monitoring, stable, altered mental status, heart failure, shock signs, decreased blood pressure, cerebral perfusion. If it is not there, observe and admit. If it is unstable, atropine followed by transcutaneous pacing, dopamine, epinephrine. Look at that. Transcutaneous pacing or transvenous pacing. So look at in cardiology, consultation should be done. And these are all the arrhythmia which are the indications. That is, if the person has got a severe prolonged PR interval, first degree AV block, Mobis type 1, Mobis type 2. Usually these two do not require much amount of pacing. They get response to what we call as a atropine, good number of times. While Mobis type 2, or we also call as a HAE, and that can progress to complete heart block. They require pacing. And if there is a symptom suggestive of ischemia or infarct, you should subject him to, send him to a cath lab and try to identify the cause of ischemia and treat that accordingly. So you can give aspirin, nitroglycerin, morphine, etc. and prepare for a cath labs. So ECG interpretation, and this should be done. So in a case of ischemia, emergency PCI, fibrinolytic, etc. And in a non-diagnosed condition, you can go for anticoagulants and medical managements. Aspirin, antiplatelets, nitroglycerin, beta blockers, and anticoagulants. This is already we have discussed many times in our ischemic heart disease chapters, that have a history, EKG, look for CPK, MB or troponin. Echo will help you. ECG is a must, and in ECG look at the ST elevation or ST depression. We call J point elevation or J point depression. Morphology of ST elevation, it is concave or convex or flat. Convex and flat is 100% abnormal. In some cases of convex also, concave also, you can have an ischemic heart disease. Look at the morphology of ST depression. Horizontal and down sloping is more in favor of ischemic heart disease. Up sloping can be sometime in case of ischemic heart disease. T wave shape, tented, broad base, asymmetrical, and hyperacute T wave is in favor of an acute MI. Then you try to localize, identify the area. So then you can make a diagnosis of STEMI and subject him to what we call as a cath lab. So these are the criteria for ST elevation, Q wave criteria, and ST elevation criteria, and in presence of left bundle branch block. At your leisure time you can go through. We have already shown you all this in ST segment. These are all the criteria for diagnosing ST elevation. It is a repetition, so I am skipping little faster. Q wave criteria, ST segment elevation criteria, LBBB and pacemaker and cardiac enzyme elevation. And this is how it progresses from tall T wave till flat ST segment and T wave upright. This is HILD, or we call Q wave MI, and this will happen in a STEMI. This is localization and which artery is involved. Primary changes, reciprocal changes. We have all shown you that. This is acute MI, this is non-STEMI, and this is unstable angina. In a STEMI, you will have a cardiac marker positive, ST segment elevation with Q wave. While in a non-STEMI, cardiac marker will be positive, but you will have a ST segment depression with T wave, good number of time T wave inversion, or you will have a T wave upright. And in an unstable angina, ST segment may be down sloping with T wave inversion, and cardiac marker will be negative. So this is non-STEMI and unstable angina. This is how the cardiac marker will be positive, what will be the period in which it will be positive, mainly we go for CPK and troponin. So this is CPK and troponin which will be detected. And this is in short what you look in a person who has got a stable angina, unstable angina, non-STEMI and STEMI. That when you come across non-STEMI, you have to, because it is a high risk. So you will have to go for aspirin, anticoagulants, etc. Is that clear? While if it is STEMI, you will have to subject him to thrombolysis followed by a primary PCI. So primary PCI can be done, or we can call facilitated PCI, or you can call rescue PCI is there in a case of a STEMI. And this is how you approach, but this is extremely difficult in India. Ideally, this is an approach for transport of a patient with a STEMI from what we call as a diagnosis till you subject him to a PCI. So that is what way it is being done, and what should be the timing intervals. This particular timing interval is impossible in India because of many factors, many factors, which we'll be discussing sometime in a when we discuss detail in management of STEMI. So this should be our goal, and this is what we call as a onset to balloon, call to balloon, emergency to balloon, or we call door to balloon, etc. These are all the terms which are being utilized, and that should be minimal interval. I end my lecture here. So I think this will be helpful to you. We'll be seeing you again in the next chapter. We'll be discussing on defibrillation and cardioversion and pacing. You should know little bit regarding that.